Hello, creative and crafty people. I hope y'all are doing well today. In this video, I'm going to show you how I created these gorgeous resin and silver wire earrings. The bezel for these earrings are made with wire that has been hammered to create a flat underside to prevent the resin from leaking out. So stick around and watch and learn how to create a pair of your very own. So the materials we'll need for this project are as follows. We'll need some 18 gauge wire, 2 pieces cut at 6 centimeters in length. You'll need some 20 gauge wire, 2 pieces cut at 4.5 centimeters. That'll be for our ear wires. We'll need a pair of looping pliers, a pair of chain nose pliers, a pair of flush cutters. I am going to be using this UV resin clear hard type by Let's Resin, who I am not sponsored by. This resin needs a UV lamp to cure, so we will be using a UV lamp of some type. This one is just a nice little small portable one. It has 3 time settings on it. I will also be using some mica powders. These mica powders are made by Pearlex. I've got True Blue and Interface Blue here. You can use whatever type of mica powders you'd like to use. And again, I'm not sponsored by them. And here you can see that Interface Blue has a little bit of a blue shine to it. Next, we're going to need some sort of cup to mix our resin in. They can be silicone or disposable, whichever. I choose to use the silicone ones because they're easier to clean up. You'll need some stirring apparatuses. I'm using the silicone stir stick and toothpick. Next, we are going to need a chasing hammer to flatten your wire. We'll need a bench block, a cut burr or a file to file the ends of your ear wires. And last but not least, we'll need some clear packing tape. Now this concludes the materials I'll be using to create these earrings. If you missed something, you can either go back and rewatch this segment of the video, or you can check out the materials list in the description of this video. Now let's get started on this project. So grabbing our 2 pieces of 20 gauge wire and the looping pliers, we're going to grab that between those top 2 most barrels around the 2mm barrel and make a loop. Like so. And you want that wire to meet back up with itself. So you have a nice tight loop. Now we're going to take the loop end of these wires together and place them between the 7 and 9mm barrels. Making sure that loop is facing the 7mm barrel and the tail end is going to wrap around the 9mm barrel. And we're going to bring that up to about 5mm from that loop. And then we're going to take those off. And we're going to grab our chain nose pliers. And we're going to grab the tail end of this wire about 2 to 3mm from the end and make a little bend. And there you can see the shape of our earrings. And now we're going to hammer the outside edge of these earrings just to give it a bit more flair. This will also harden the wire as you're hammering that. And there you could see that little bit of a shine there. And that the top part of this wire is still rounded while this side is flattened. We want it to be comfortable in the ear. And there you can see the loop is pulled apart a bit, which often happens with hammering. We're just going to pull that back tight. Now I'm going to take my cup burr or file, if you prefer that, and place that over the end of that ear wire. It tends to get a little sharp and we don't want bleeding ears. So there, they're complete. Next we're going to grab our 18 gauge wire and the looping pliers. Using the 2mm barrel, we're going to wrap the wire around to make a loop. So here I'm going to wrap, and then I want the tail end of my wire to come back and touch on itself, like so. And there you can see where it's done that. And now we're going to take the wire off of the looping pliers, and we're going to take that loop end and place it between the 7 and 9mm barrels, and then push the wire about a centimeter up, and then wrap the other tail end of the wire, well, not other, but just the tail end, and then bring the two ends of the wire on either side of that loop. So I'm just going to pull that over the top like so. And this is the beginning of our little frames for our earrings. So now I've got a little too much tail on here, so I'm going to grab my flush cutters and we're going to snip off the end of this. But I want to snip it at an angle where it lines right up with the other side of this quote-unquote bezel we're going to make. So here you can see I've got that in line with the wire, making my angle cut. And then I'm going to kind of push that back up against that wire, so just kind of making it snug there. And there you can see that that tail end of the wire is right up against the base of that wire. So now I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers and I'm going to straighten this loop on top. So I'm going to grab at the base and then just straighten it up. And there you can see those wires line right up with each other. And now you're going to do both sides the same. Now we're going to take our quote-unquote bezel and we're going to hammer this. We want the back side of these charms to be flat. So here you can see this is the front side that I hammered, and you can see it's not quite flat. There are some little divots there. But this side that was on the bench block is completely flat, and that's what you want. And so I've done both of those bezels, and now I'm taking a piece of packing tape and placing it down, and I'm going to stick the flat side of these earring charms onto the packing tape. And now with a tool of your preference, going to burnish these earring charms down onto the packing tape. And now we'll need to get our UV lamp set up. So I have a corded UV lamp here, and this has 3 different time levels. There's 60 and a minute and a half, and then I think it's 2.5 minutes. And there you can see there's lights under there. Next, I'm going to need my UV resin and a toothpick, and we're just going to collect a tiny little drop on the end of this toothpick, and I'm going to place that up into that top corner of the bezel. Don't push too hard, we don't want that to come loose. And then we're going to stick our UV light on there and cure that for about 60 seconds. And now we're going to do our second one, and I'm doing one at a time because you don't want that resin to leak out. The whole reason we're doing this little top section first is to make sure that we seal this little corner off so resin doesn't leak out of your bezel. So now I'm going to use the UV light again for about another 60 minutes. Okay, and now, as you can see, I've got a little tiny drop of resin at that top corner, and it's got it all sealed off. So next I'm going to grab my little containers that I'm going to mix the resin and the mica powders in. I'm going to grab my UV resin, and I'm going to put about 2 drops in this cup. Like so. And then I'm going to grab the other cup and add about 3 drops. It looks like I'm adding a lot more, but my drops are coming out a little too slow, and there was an air bubble on the end of that resin container. Okay, so as you can see, it's just a little bit more in the other. Now I'm going to grab my mica powders. Again, we're going to use this true blue color and this interface blue. And see that shine in there, that blue in there? So we're going to start with the interface blue, and we're going to put that in the smaller amount of resin. So I'm going to grab my little stick I used to stir with. You see that blue shine in there? And I'm going to grab a small amount of this mica powder. About like that much, maybe just a little more. And then we're going to dump that right into that container, into the resin. And then we're just going to stir that up. And there you can see that's complete. And then next, I'm going to grab my blue mica powder. And it's not a good idea to open this right over the top of your resin and your pieces, so don't do what I'm doing. Do it off to the side. And I'm going to grab a small amount of that mica powder and stick that in there. And that small amount is quite a bit for these little small drops. So you don't need to use as much. You could use less or more, whichever you are going for. If you want the more transparent look, then you probably need to use a little less. This is kind of it's translucent but not solid. Okay, so now I'm grabbing that interface colored resin, and I am going to start placing that down. Sorry about my camera, y'all. I bonked it while I was doing this. And so I'm just going to start coloring just a thin layer coming down each of these earrings. So when I just kind of get that right down, leaving a space at the bottom. And I've already placed some of that color up into that corner. And I'm just doing it a little bit thicker here because I don't have any clear under this part. And I'm going to try to get these to be about the same. They're not going to be perfect. That's the nice thing about art. It's never perfect. And now we're going to add the blue. And so I'm just adding that to the bottom here where there was that space until it kind of fills that space and that void. Like so. And then I'm just going to add a little drop more. And now I'm taking my toothpick and I'm just drawing some lines up into the point of this piece, and then I'm pulling some back down into the piece, the other color, and kind of swirling the resin to get that variation. And after I've done both pieces, I'm going to put it under the UV lamp and let that cure. Y'all, I had to restart this piece because the lighting, you couldn't see anything I was doing. So I put it on a white background now, and so that you could see it, but the lighting is kind of off and on in this, so I apologize in advance. You still get the idea and can still see. This only happens a couple of times. So here you can see I'm putting some of that UV resin on top of this piece. And I'm getting a good little amount on there. And then I'm going to drag that resin up to the corner right over the bezel to where the loop meets back to the bottom bezel part, if that makes sense. As you can see, that's what I'm doing there. And then I'm going to bring that resin over the top of the frame all the way around this piece. So I want it to come right to the edge. And this is pretty high viscosity resin, so it kind of stays right on top there. It doesn't spill over. And then I'm going to do the same for the other piece. And now you can see that is finished. And I'm going to cure this resin again between layers. And here I'm back with another layer of the resin, the clear resin. So here I'm going to put a couple of little drops on top of the end of this, of these pieces. And I'm going to add a little tiny dot to the top of my little drops there. And then with my toothpick, I'm again going to pull this all the way up to that corner and around all the edges. And so you could see how that pulls down there right to the edge. And there's both pieces completed. And now I'm going to cure that again. And here they are, nice and cured. And now I'm going back to my blue background because the lighting is much better here. And now I'm going to peel these pieces off gently. And the back side of these pieces are flat and slightly dull from being on the tape. So I want to put a layer of resin on the back and dome these a little bit as well. So I'm using a piece of scrap copper to hold the bezel up level, and then I'm adding a drop of resin or a few drops of resin on each side. And then again, like we did on the front, I'm going to spread that resin around. And while holding on to that loop at the top, I'm going to spread this resin around just like we did earlier. Now we're going to cure this for about 2.5 minutes. Now with the pieces complete, I'm putting my charms onto the ear wires. Taking my chain nose pliers, I'm going to twist away, not forward. That will misshape your little loop. Take your charm and place it on with the front side facing forward. Then with the chain nose pliers, we're going to twist that little loop back into place, like so. And now we have a completed pair of earrings. So what did you guys think of this project? Would you yourself make a pair like these? Do you like the colors? What other colors would you use? How would you do yours differently? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed watching this video, please don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. This just pushes my video out to more who love this sort of thing. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next Thursday.